The frigid water of Ely Creek gripped Zara Halliday's body like a vice, her desperate screams piercing the crisp Nevada air as the current swept her downstream. 6 months pregnant and terrified, she clawed helplessly at the rushing waters that had claimed her when the weathered bridge collapsed beneath her feet. No one in Ely seemed to hear her cries, no one except Yancy Grayson, who stood transfixed for only a heartbeat before dropping his saddlebags and diving headlong into the churning waters without a second thought. It was the spring of 1878, and the small mining town of Ely, Nevada was finally thawing after a particularly harsh winter. The creek that meandered through the western edge of town had swollen with snowmelt, transforming the typically gentle stream into a dangerous rush of water. Zara had only been passing through, headed west to San Francisco where she hoped to build a new life for herself and her unborn child. Yancy felt the shock of cold water envelope him as he plunged into the creek. A seasoned cowboy who had weathered the harshest conditions the West could throw at him, even he was unprepared for the fierce pull of the current. 20 yards ahead, he could see the woman's blue dress billowing in the water, her pale arms flailing as she fought to keep her head above the surface. "Hold on!" he shouted, powerful arms cutting through the water as he swam toward her. "I'm coming. Try to grab onto something." Zara could barely hear him over the roar of the water and her own terrified gasps. Her long dark hair was plastered to her face, obscuring her vision as she struggled. The weight of her sodden dress and her swollen belly made it nearly impossible to stay afloat. Just as she felt her strength giving out, she felt strong arms encircle her from behind. "I've got you," Yancy said firmly in her ear, his breath warm against her cold skin. "Don't fight me. Let me get us to shore." Using one arm to keep her secure against his chest, Yancy used his free arm and legs to guide them toward the creek bank, fighting the current every inch of the way. By the time he felt his boots scrape against the creek bed, his muscles screamed with exertion. "Can you stand?" he asked, helping Zara find her footing in the shallower water near the bank. She tried, but her legs buckled beneath her. Without hesitation, Yancy scooped her into his arms and carried her the remaining distance to dry land, setting her down gently on the grassy bank. "The baby," she gasped, her hands immediately going to her rounded belly. "My baby. You're both safe now," Yancy assured her, though concern etched lines across his tanned face. He removed his sodden jacket and draped it around her shoulders. "We need to get you to a doctor. Town's just up that hill." For the first time, Zara looked at her rescuer properly. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sandy brown hair darkened by the water and kind hazel eyes that studied her with genuine concern. His face was weathered from years under the sun, but she guessed he couldn't be more than 30. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling from cold and shock. "I thought I was going to die." "No need for thanks, madam. Any decent man would have done the same." Yancy glanced back at the roaring creek. "That old bridge has been rickety for years. Never should have been left standing." A sharp pain suddenly gripped Zara's abdomen, causing her to gasp and double over. Yancy's expression changed from concern to alarm. "The doctor, now." Without waiting for her response, he gathered her into his arms again and started up the hill toward town, his long strides eating up the distance despite his waterlogged boots and the weight of the woman in his arms. Dr. Miles Anderson's office was located on the main street of Ely, a modest building with a weathered sign declaring physician and surgeon in faded paint. Yancy kicked at the door, unable to knock with Zara in his arms. "Doc, need help out here." The door swung open to reveal a silver-haired man with spectacles perched on the end of his nose. "Yancy Grayson, what in tarnation?" His words cut off as he spotted the soaking wet, pregnant woman in Yancy's arms. "Bring her in, quickly." As Yancy carried Zara into the examination room, the doctor turned to his assistant, a middle-aged woman named Martha. Fetch dry towels and heat some water. The lady's half frozen. She fell in the creek when the bridge collapsed, Yancy explained, carefully setting Zara on the examination table. She's having pains. Dr. Anderson's experienced hands quickly examined Zara while Martha brought towels and began gently drying her hair. What's your name, dear? The doctor asked. Zara. Zara Halliday, she replied through chattering teeth. How far along are you? 6 months, Zara managed, her eyes darting fearfully to Yancy, who stood awkwardly by the door. Please, my baby, let's get you warmed up and into some dry clothes first, Dr. Anderson said soothingly. He turned to Yancy. You should get yourself dry too before you catch pneumonia. Martha can take over here. Yancy hesitated, his eyes locked with Zara's for a moment. Something in her frightened gaze tugged at him. I'll be back to check on you, he promised before stepping outside. Martha helped Zara out of her wet clothes and into a simple cotton nightgown kept on hand for patients. As Dr. Anderson examined her more thoroughly, Zara revealed that she had been traveling from St. Louis, hoping to reach San Francisco before the baby arrived. My husband died in a mining accident 3 months ago, she explained, wincing as another pain shot through her. There was nothing left for me back east. Dr. Anderson nodded sympathetically as he pressed gently on her abdomen. The pains you're experiencing are likely from the stress and the cold, not true labor. The baby's heartbeat is strong. You're a fortunate woman that Mr. Grayson was nearby. Who is he? Zara asked, accepting a cup of hot tea from Martha. One of our local ranchers, Martha replied. Has a small spread about 5 miles north of town. Keeps to himself mostly, but he's a good man. Never hesitates to help when someone's in need. As if summoned by their conversation, Yancy reappeared in the doorway, now dressed in dry clothes, a simple flannel shirt and worn denim pants. His hair was still damp but combed back from his face. How is she, Doc? He asked, his eyes immediately finding Zara's. Both mother and child appear to be stable, though I'd like to keep Mrs. Halliday here overnight for observation, Dr. Anderson replied. She needs rest and warmth. Yancy nodded, relief evident in his expression. Good. That's good. He stepped further into the room. Madam, I found this washed up a bit downstream. He held out a sodden carpet bag. Figured it might be yours. Zara's eyes widened. My things. I thought they were lost. She reached for the bag, her fingers brushing against Yancy's as she took it from him. Thank you, Mr. Grayson. I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness today. Please call me Yancy. He shuffled slightly, uncomfortable with her gratitude. And there's no need for repayment. Just glad I was passing by when I was. Where will you go now, Mrs. Halliday? Dr. Anderson asked as he made notes in his ledger. Zara's face fell. I don't know. I had just enough money for passage to San Francisco, but most of it was in my purse, which is probably halfway to Carson City by now. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Yancy cleared his throat. There's a boarding house in town, Mrs. Parker's place. She's a good woman. I'm afraid I couldn't afford even a single night, Zara admitted, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Before anyone could respond, the door to the doctor's office burst open, and a stocky man with an impressive mustache strode in, water dripping from his heavy coat. Sheriff Thomas Blackwell, he announced, removing his hat. Heard we had some excitement at the old bridge. Everyone all right? Dr. Anderson quickly explained the situation while Zara sank deeper into the blankets wrapped around her shoulders, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. The town council's been meaning to tear down that bridge for months, the sheriff sighed. Guess this forces our hand. He turned his attention to Zara. Sorry about your troubles, madam. Anything you need while you're in Ely. Mrs. Halliday has lost her purse in the creek, Dr. Anderson explained. She was on her way to San Francisco. The sheriff scratched his chin thoughtfully. Well, now that's a predicament. Stage doesn't come through for another week, and even then, she can stay at my place. Yancy interrupted, the words seeming to surprise even him. I mean, I've got a spare room in the ranch house. It's nothing fancy, but it's warm and dry. Just until she figures out what to do next. All eyes turned to him, and Yancy felt his ears growing hot under their scrutiny. It wouldn't be proper for a lady in her condition to have nowhere to go, he added gruffly. That's mighty generous of you, Grayson, the sheriff said, studying the cowboy carefully. But perhaps Mrs. Parker's boarding house would be more appropriate for a lady in Mrs. Halliday's condition. I could work, Zara spoke up, her voice stronger now, to pay for my keep wherever I stay. I can cook, clean, so. Dr. Anderson exchanged glances with Martha. Mrs. Halliday, you need rest, at least for a few days. That was quite an ordeal you endured. I have a housekeeper already, Yancy said. Old Mrs. Jenkins comes by 3 times a week. But she could use some help, especially with planting season coming on. The offer stands if you want it, madam. No strings attached. You can leave whenever you're ready to continue your journey. Zara studied him, trying to discern his intentions. His expression was open, his hazel eyes steady and honest. After a moment, she nodded slowly. If the doctor thinks I'm well enough to leave tomorrow, I would be grateful for your hospitality, Mr. Grayson. Just until I can earn enough for my passage to San Francisco. Then it's settled, Yancy said with a nod. I'll come by tomorrow to fetch you, if that's all right, Doc? Dr. Anderson nodded. Provided she has a restful night and no further complications, I don't see why not. Though I'd advise against any strenuous activity for at least a week, Mrs. Halliday. As the men made arrangements, Martha leaned close to Zara. Yancy Grayson is a good man, she whispered. Lost his wife and baby during childbirth 5 years ago. Hasn't shown much interest in company since then, but he's respected in these parts. You'll be safe with him. Zara absorbed this information, her hand resting protectively on her belly. Perhaps fate had brought her to this place for a reason. At the very least, she and her child had been given a second chance today. I'll be back tomorrow morning, Yancy promised as he prepared to leave. Try to rest easy. As he stepped out into the fading light of day, Yancy wondered what had possessed him to open his home to a stranger. Something about the vulnerability in Zara Halliday's eyes had stirred feelings he thought long buried. He told himself it was simple decency, the same instinct that had driven him to leap into the creek without hesitation. Nothing more. But as he mounted his horse for the ride back to his ranch, he couldn't deny the strange sense that his life had somehow changed course today, as surely as if he too had been swept away by the rushing waters of Ely Creek. Morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through the doctor's office window. Zara had slept fitfully, plagued by dreams of rushing water and desperate struggles to breathe. Each time she woke, her hands immediately went to her belly, reassured by the occasional movements of her child within. Dr. Anderson arrived early to check on her. The pains have stopped? He asked as he examined her. Yes, nothing since last evening, Zara confirmed. Just the usual discomforts of carrying a child. The doctor nodded, satisfied. You're fortunate, Mrs. Halliday. That fall could have been much worse for both you and the baby. I know, she said softly. If Mr. Grayson hadn't been there. Providence works in mysterious ways. Anderson remarked as he packed away his stethoscope. Speaking of Mr. Grayson, he should be arriving shortly. Are you certain about staying at his ranch? Mrs. Parker would likely take you in for a reduced rate if I spoke with her. Zara considered this but shook her head. Mr. Grayson has been nothing but kind. And if I can work to earn my keep while I recover my strength, I'd prefer that to charity. Dr. Anderson smiled gently. Pride is a fine quality, Mrs. Halliday, but sometimes accepting help is the wiser course. I've been managing on my own since my husband died, Zara replied with quiet dignity. I intend to continue doing so for the sake of my child. Very well. The doctor patted her hand. But remember that there's no shame in needing assistance occasionally. The sound of horse hooves outside drew their attention. Moments later, Yancy Grayson entered, removing his hat as he stepped through the door. His sandy hair was neatly combed, and he wore a clean shirt under his leather vest. Zara couldn't help noticing that he'd made an effort with his appearance. Morning, document Mrs. Halliday. He greeted them, his eyes lingering on Zara. How are you feeling today? Much better, thank you, she replied, suddenly conscious of her own disheveled state. Martha had helped her wash and comb her hair, but she was still wearing the borrowed nightgown under a shawl. I hope I haven't put you to too much trouble. No trouble at all, Yancy assured her. I've brought something that might help. He produced a bundle wrapped in brown paper. Stopped by the general store. Nothing fancy, but it should fit over. He gestured vaguely toward her pregnant belly, a hint of color rising in his cheeks. Zara accepted the package gratefully. Inside was a simple calico dress, the fabric sturdy but soft, with extra material to accommodate her condition. This is very thoughtful, she said, genuinely touched by the gesture. I'll repay you once I've earned some money. Yancy waved away her words. Consider it payment for helping Mrs. Jenkins with the house. She's been after me for months to hire some additional help. Dr. Anderson cleared his throat. I'll leave you to get dressed, Mrs. Halliday. Mr. Grayson, a word outside. The men stepped out, and Martha helped Zara into the new dress. It fit remarkably well, the fabric draping comfortably over her swollen belly. He's got a good eye for size, Martha commented with a knowing smile. Must have been paying attention yesterday. Zara felt her cheeks warm at the implication. He's merely being kind to a stranger in need. Martha hummed, adjusting the collar of the dress. That man hasn't shown a speck of interest in any woman since he lost his Elizabeth. Then he jumps into a freezing creek to save you and offers you a place to stay. Call it what you will. Before Zara could formulate a response, the men returned. Dr. Anderson carried a small parcel of medicines, which he handed to her. A tonic for strength and some willow bark tea if you experience any more discomfort, he explained. Mr. Grayson has promised to bring you back in a week for me to check on you and the baby. Zara thanked him and Martha profusely for their care before allowing Yancy to help her into the wagon he had brought. Her salvaged carpetbag, now dried out but worse for wear, sat on the seat beside her. The April air was crisp but not unpleasant as they set off through the main street of Ely. The town was smaller than she had expected. Just a few dozen buildings clustered around the main thoroughfare. Men in work clothes and the occasional well-dressed businessman nodded respectfully to Yancy as they passed. A few curious glances were cast in Zara's direction, but no one approached. It's not much, Yancy said, misinterpreting her scrutiny of the town. But it's growing. The mines bring new folks in every month. It seems perfectly pleasant, Zara assured him. As they left the town behind, the landscape opened up into a vista of sagebrush plains backed by distant mountains. How far is your ranch? About 5 miles north, Yancy replied, handling the reins with easy confidence. It's small compared to some, but I manage. 200 acres, mostly grazing land for cattle, but I've got some decent farmland too. Do you run it alone? Zara asked, finding herself genuinely curious about this quiet man who had saved her life. Got 3 hired hands who help with the cattle. Good men. He glanced at her. They bunk in a separate house near the barn, so you needn't worry about propriety. I wasn't, Zara said quickly, though the thought had crossed her mind. I trust your intentions, Mr. Grayson. Yancy, he reminded her gently. Yancy, she echoed, testing the name. And you must call me Zara. They fell into a comfortable silence as the wagon rumbled along the dirt road. Zara found herself studying his profile surreptitiously. There was a quiet strength to him, evident in the set of his shoulders and the confident way he handled the team. His hands were calloused and strong working hands, yet they had been so gentle when he pulled her from the water. Your housekeeper, Zara said after a while. Mrs. Jenkins, will she mind my presence? Yancy chuckled, the sound warm and unexpected. Mrs. Jenkins has been trying to marry me off to every eligible woman within 50 miles for the past 3 years. She'll probably consider you sent by Providence. Oh, Zara said, unsure how to respond to that. I should make it clear that I fully intend to continue to San Francisco once I've saved enough money. The smile faded from Yancy's face, replaced by his usual serious expression. Of course, I didn't mean to imply otherwise. Another silence fell, this one slightly awkward. Zara felt a twinge of regret for her blunt words, but she needed to establish boundaries from the start. Her life had been shaped by too many broken promises to risk misunderstandings now. There it is, Yancy said after they had traveled for nearly an hour. Rocking G Ranch. Ahead, nestled in a small valley with a creek running through it, sat a modest but well-maintained ranch house with several outbuildings. A corral held a few horses, and in the distance, Zara could make out the shapes of cattle grazing on the spring grass. It's lovely, she said sincerely, admiring the peaceful setting. Yancy's expression softened with pride. Started with nothing but the land. Built most of it myself. As they approached, a gangly young man jogged out to meet them. Mr. Grayson, we were getting worried when you didn't come back yesterday. Got delayed in town, Charlie? Yancy explained, pulling the wagon to a stop in front of the house. Mrs. Halliday, this is Charlie Owens, one of my hands. Charlie, Mrs. Halliday will be staying with us for a while. Charlie, who couldn't be more than 19, tipped his hat respectfully. Madam. His eyes widened slightly as he noticed her condition, but he had the good manners not to comment. Charlie, fetch Mrs. Halliday's bag and tell Mrs. Jenkins we have a guest. Yancy instructed as he came around to help Zara down from the wagon. His strong hands circled her waist as he lifted her down, and for a moment, they stood close together, his hands lingering perhaps a second longer than necessary. Zara felt her heart quicken inexplicably before he released her and stepped back. This way, he said, leading her toward the house. The ranch house was larger than it appeared from a distance, a one-story structure built of sturdy logs with a wide porch across the front. Inside, it was simple but comfortable, with polished wooden floors and practical furniture. A large stone fireplace dominated the main room, and windows let in ample light. Mrs. Jenkins keeps it tidy, Yancy explained, seeming slightly self-conscious as Zara took in her surroundings. It's not fancy, but it's home. It's wonderful, Zara said honestly. After months of traveling and staying in shabby boarding houses, the clean, open space felt luxurious. A door opened, and a stout woman with gray hair pulled into a severe bun emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. There you are, Mr. Grayson. Charlie tells me we have a oh. She stopped short at the sight of Zara, her eyes immediately taking in her pregnant state. Mrs. Jenkins, this is Mrs. Zara Halliday, Yancy introduced them. She'll be staying with us for a while and helping around the house. Mrs. Halliday, my housekeeper, Mrs. Edith Jenkins. Pleased to meet you, Zara said, extending her hand. Mrs. Jenkins recovered quickly, grasping Zara's hand warmly. Welcome, dearie. My goodness, you look about ready to drop. Come sit down before you fall down. Mrs. Halliday had an accident at the creek bridge yesterday, Yancy explained as Mrs. Jenkins ushered Zara to a comfortable chair. She's staying here until she's recovered enough to continue her journey. The bridge finally gave way. Did it? Mrs. Jenkins clicked her tongue. Been saying for years that thing was a death trap. You poor dear. And in your condition. While Yancy explained the full situation, Mrs. Jenkins fussed over Zara, bringing her a cup of tea and a plate of freshly baked biscuits. You must be starving. Eating for two, after all. The older woman insisted, pressing the food on her. Zara had to admit that she was ravenous. The simple food tasted like the finest meal she'd had in months. These are delicious, Mrs. Jenkins. Call me Edith, dear. We don't stand on ceremony here. The housekeeper shot a meaningful look at Yancy. I've been trying to teach this one some manners for years, but he's hopeless. Yancy's lips twitched in what might have been a suppressed smile. I'll show Mrs. Halliday to her room so she can rest. Doc Anderson said she should take it easy for a few days. Of course. I'll just freshen up the guest room, Mrs. Jenkins said, bustling away. Left alone with Yancy again, Zara felt suddenly shy. Your housekeeper is very kind. She's got a heart of gold under all that fussing, he agreed, taking a seat across from her. She came with the recommendation that she'd whip this bachelor establishment into shape, and she certainly has. How long have you lived here? Zara asked, genuinely curious about this man who had so unexpectedly become her benefactor. Built this place 8 years ago, Yancy replied, his eyes drifting to the window where the ranch land stretched out before them. Came west with nothing but dreams and determination after the war. Worked cattle drives, saved every penny. Bought this land when no one else wanted it. You've accomplished a great deal, Zara observed. A shadow crossed his face. Had different dreams once. A family to fill this house. Martha's words about Yancy losing his wife and baby echoed in Zara's mind. She hesitated, then said softly, I heard about your loss. I'm very sorry. Yancy's gaze snapped back to her, surprise evident before his expression closed off. It was a long time ago. He stood abruptly. You should rest. The journey from town must have tired you. Zara recognized the retreat, the pain still too raw to discuss with a stranger. She nodded, allowing him to help her up from the chair. As they walked toward the guest room, she felt the baby stir within her. A firm kick against her ribs that made her gasp and press a hand to her side. What is it? Are you unwell? Yancy asked, alarmed. No, just the baby, Zara explained, a small smile touching her lips. Very active today. Yancy's gaze dropped to her hand on her belly, an unreadable expression crossing his face. For a moment, she thought he might ask to feel the movement, but instead he nodded stiffly and continued down the hallway. The guest room was small but pleasant, with a comfortable-looking bed covered in a colorful quilt and a window overlooking the creek. Mrs. Jenkins had opened the window slightly, allowing fresh air to circulate, and placed a vase of wildflowers on the bedside table. I hope you'll be comfortable here, Yancy said, standing awkwardly in the doorway. Mrs. Jenkins will bring your bag shortly. It's perfect, Zara assured him. Thank you, Yancy, for everything. He nodded, seemingly at a loss for words, then turned to leave. Yancy, Zara called after him, causing him to pause and look back. I want you to know that I intend to earn my keep here. I'm not looking for charity. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Never thought you were Mrs. Halliday. With that, he left her to settle in. Alone in the room, Zara sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself a moment to absorb the whirlwind of the past 24 hours. Yesterday, she had been a desperate widow with dwindling funds, heading west on nothing more than hope and determination. Today, she found herself in the home of a stranger, a reserved, quietly kind man who had risked his life to save hers. She ran her hand over the swell of her belly, feeling her child move beneath her palm. "We've been given a second chance," she whispered, "just long enough to catch our breath and continue our journey." Yet as she lay down to rest on the comfortable bed, Zara couldn't help wondering if perhaps their journey had already brought them exactly where they needed to be. The following days established a rhythm to life at the Rocking G Ranch. True to Dr. Anderson's instructions, Zara rested frequently, but she insisted on helping with light household duties. Mrs. Jenkins initially protested but soon came to appreciate Zara's skill with a needle as she mended shirts and linens that had accumulated in a basket by the fireplace. Yancy was often out working the ranch from dawn till dusk, but he made a point to check on her each evening, inquiring about her health with genuine concern. Their conversations were brief but gradually grew more comfortable as the initial awkwardness between them faded. On the fourth day, Zara ventured out to the porch, needing fresh air and sunshine after being cooped up indoors. The April weather had turned mild, with wildflowers dotting the grasslands surrounding the ranch house. She sat in a rocking chair, working on a piece of mending, when she spotted Yancy returning from the fields on horseback. He rode with natural grace, his body moving in perfect harmony with the chestnut gelding beneath him. Seeing her on the porch, he altered his course and approached, dismounting with a fluid motion that spoke of years in the saddle. "You're looking better," he observed, tying his horse to the hitching post and removing his hat as he climbed the porch steps. "Some color in your cheeks now." "I feel much stronger," Zara replied, setting aside her sewing. "Mrs. Jenkins has been feeding me as though I'm at risk of wasting away." Yancy chuckled, the sound still rare enough that Zara found herself treasuring it. "That's her solution to most problems. Feed 'em till they can't move, then they can't get into any more trouble." "It seems to be working," Zara admitted, resting a hand on her expanding belly. "The baby is certainly more active." Yancy's eyes followed the movement of her hand, and again Zara caught that fleeting look of something longing, perhaps, before he masked it. "Mrs. Jenkins mentioned you're a fine hand with a needle," he said, changing the subject. "Said you fixed up my old shirt better than new." "I used to help my mother with sewing when I was young," Zara explained. "Later, after my husband died, I took in mending to earn extra money." Yancy nodded, leaning against the porch railing. For once, he didn't seem in a hurry to retreat from her company. "You never mentioned what brought you west all alone." Zara's hands returned to the fabric in her lap. "My husband, Thomas, worked in the mines back in Missouri. There was a collapse." She took a steadying breath. "I discovered I was with child a week after his funeral. His family blamed me for encouraging him to take the mining job instead of working their farm. When they learned about the baby, they offered to take it once it was born, as if I would give up my child." Anger flashed in Yancy's eyes. "That's not right." "No, it wasn't," Zara agreed. "So I decided to leave, to go somewhere no one knew me and start fresh. I had heard that San Francisco is growing rapidly, with opportunities for everyone willing to work hard. It's a long journey for a woman alone," Yancy observed, his tone free of judgment. "Yes, well, necessity often pushes us beyond what we think we can endure," Zara said simply. "What about you? You mentioned fighting in the war." Yancy's expression grew distant. "Cavalry. Joined up in '63 when I was 18, fresh off my father's farm in Pennsylvania. Saw things no young man should see." He shook his head slightly. "Came west afterward, like many others. Seemed like the only place big enough to outrun the memories." "Did it work?" Zara asked softly. His eyes met hers, surprisingly vulnerable. "Some days." The moment stretched between them, fragile and intimate. Then the sound of a wagon approaching broke the spell, and Yancy straightened up, replacing his hat. "That'll be Mrs. Jenkins's son bringing supplies from town," he said, his tone returning to its usual matter-of-fact cadence. "I should help unload." As he descended the porch steps, Zara found herself watching his retreating form with a curious ache in her chest. In those brief moments of openness, she had glimpsed the man beneath the reserved exterior, a man carrying burdens as heavy as her own. The wagon pulled up, driven by a solidly built young man who bore a strong resemblance to Mrs. Jenkins. He tipped his hat to Zara as Yancy approached to help with the supplies. "Brought the mail too, Mr. Grayson?" the young man called, handing over a small bundle of letters. Yancy thanked him and glanced through the mail as the unloading continued. Zara noticed his posture stiffen as he read what appeared to be a telegram. His expression darkened before he folded the paper and tucked it into his pocket. That evening at supper, Yancy was unusually quiet, responding to Mrs. Jenkins's chatter with distracted monosyllables. Zara caught his troubled glance more than once, but he offered no explanation. After Mrs. Jenkins had cleared the dishes and retired to her small quarters off the kitchen, Yancy finally broke his silence. "I received news today that might affect your plans." Zara looked up from her tea, apprehension flickering through her. "Oh, the spring floods have washed out portions of the Western Trail," Yancy explained, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. "The stage won't be running to Carson City for at least 3 weeks, maybe longer. From there, it's still a hard journey to San Francisco." "I see," Zara said, absorbing this information. "Well, I suppose I'll just need to stay in Ely a bit longer than planned. Perhaps Mrs. Parker would have room at her boarding house by then." "You're welcome to stay here," Yancy said quickly, then added in a more measured tone. "That is, if you're comfortable. There's plenty of work for willing hands, even with your condition." Zara studied him, trying to decipher his true feelings. His offer seemed genuine, but there was something in his expression she couldn't quite read. "Are you certain I wouldn't be imposing? 3 more weeks is asking a great deal." "Not at all," Yancy assured her. "Truth is, Mrs. Jenkins has been more cheerful with another woman in the house, and the place has never been so tidy." Zara smiled at that. High praise indeed. She hesitated, then added, "If I'm to stay longer, I must insist on proper wages. It wouldn't be right otherwise." Yancy considered this, then nodded. "Fair enough. We'll work out terms that satisfy us both." With that settled, a comfortable silence fell between them. Zara found herself unexpectedly relieved at the delay in her journey. The ranch had begun to feel like a sanctuary after months of uncertainty and fear. "Tomorrow's Sunday," Yancy said suddenly. "Mrs. Jenkins always attends church in town. Would you care to join her? Might do you good to meet some of the townspeople." "I'd like that," Zara replied, touched by his thoughtfulness. "Though I don't have anything suitable for church." "Mrs. Jenkins could help with that," Yancy said. "She's quite handy with alterations, I'm told." "And you?" Zara asked. "Do you attend services?" A shadow crossed his face. "Not for some years now." Zara didn't press the issue, recognizing the same crisis of faith she had wrestled with after Thomas's death. "Well, thank you for the suggestion. I think I will go with Mrs. Jenkins." Yancy nodded, rising from the table. "I should check on the new calves before turning in." "Good night, Zara." "Good night, Yancy," she replied, watching as he took his hat from the peg by the door and stepped out into the gathering darkness. Left alone, Zara found herself contemplating the strange twist of fate that had brought her to this place and this man. She had planned every step of her journey west with careful precision, yet one near tragedy had altered her course completely. The practical part of her insisted this was merely a temporary detour, but something deeper whispered that perhaps she had already found what she was seeking. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright. With Mrs. Jenkins's help, Zara had altered one of her own dresses to accommodate Zara's condition, adding panels of complementary fabric with neat, invisible stitching. The result was surprisingly elegant, transforming the simple calico into something almost fashionable. "You look lovely, dear," Mrs. Jenkins declared as she helped Zara pin up her dark hair. "That shade of blue brings out your eyes." Zara hardly recognized herself in the small mirror. The woman who gazed back at her had color in her cheeks and a brightness in her eyes that had been absent for months. "Thank you for your help, Edith. I would have been mortified to attend church looking shabby." "Nonsense. The good Lord doesn't care about fancy clothes," Mrs. Jenkins declared, though she straightened her own best bonnet with obvious pride. "But there's no harm in looking your best, especially when meeting folks for the first time." Yancy was in the yard when they emerged, hitching his team to the wagon. He glanced up as Zara approached, and she caught the flash of appreciation in his eyes before he quickly looked away. "You ladies ready?" he asked, offering his hand to help them up to the seat. "You're coming too?" Zara asked, surprised. "Thought I'd make an appearance," Yancy replied, not quite meeting her eyes. "Been a while since I showed my face in town on a Sunday." Mrs. Jenkins beamed with approval. "High time, Mr. Grayson. Pastor Williams will be pleased to see you." The journey to town was pleasant. With Mrs. Jenkins chatting happily about the various residents of Ely they were likely to encounter at the service. Zara found herself nervous at the prospect of meeting so many strangers, but was reassured by Yancy's solid presence beside her on the wagon seat. The small white church on the edge of town was already bustling with activity when they arrived. Families in their Sunday best gathered on the steps, exchanging greetings and news. Heads turned as Yancy helped Zara down from the wagon, and a murmur of curiosity rippled through the crowd. "Mr. Grayson, what a pleasant surprise," called a tall, thin man in a minister's collar, approaching with an outstretched hand. "It's been too long since we've seen you at worship." "Pastor Williams," Yancy greeted him, shaking his hand. "Allow me to introduce Mrs. Zara Halliday. She's staying at the ranch for a time." The pastor's kind eyes took in Zara's condition without judgment. "Mrs. Halliday, welcome to our congregation. Any friend of Mr. Grayson's is most welcome here." "Thank you, Pastor," Zara replied, warming to his genuine smile. "I'm grateful for the opportunity to worship with you today." More introductions followed as Mrs. Jenkins proudly presented Zara to what seemed like every member of the congregation. Most were welcoming, though Zara detected curious glances and whispered speculations about her presence at Yancy's side. A handsome woman in an elaborate bonnet approached, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Yancy Grayson, as I live and breathe. I didn't believe Constance when she told me you were here." "Miss Thornton," Yancy acknowledged with a polite nod. "Mrs. Halliday, this is Miss Rebecca Thornton, daughter of Harold Thornton, who owns the mercantile." "Pleased to meet you," Zara said, extending her hand. Miss Thornton's gaze flickered over Zara's pregnant form before she offered a limp handshake. "Likewise, I'm sure. What brings you to our little community, Mrs. Halliday?" Passing through. Before Zara could answer, the church bell began to ring, signaling the start of the service. Yancy placed a protective hand at the small of Zara's back, guiding her toward the entrance. "We should find seats," he said, effectively ending the conversation with Miss Thornton. Inside, the church was simple but beautiful, with polished wooden pews and sunlight streaming through clear glass windows. Yancy led Zara and Mrs. Jenkins to a pew near the back, positioning himself at the end as if guarding them from unwanted attention. The service was heartfelt, with familiar hymns that Zara found herself singing along to, the words coming back to her from childhood. Pastor Williams preached a sermon on compassion and second chances that seemed so perfectly suited to her situation that Zara wondered if Yancy had spoken to him beforehand. Throughout the service, Zara was acutely aware of Yancy beside her. His deep voice joined in the hymns hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. Once, when she struggled to find the correct page in the hymnal, his hand brushed against hers as he helped her, sending an unexpected warmth through her. After the service, the congregation gathered outside for socializing. Several women approached Zara with genuine welcomes and invitations to join the Ladies' Aid Society. "We meet on Thursday afternoons," explained Mrs. Bennett, the blacksmith's wife. "Nothing formal, just sewing and conversation. We're working on quilts for the orphanage in Carson City." "That sounds lovely," Zara replied sincerely. "I'd be delighted to join you, if Mrs. Jenkins is planning to attend." "Wouldn't miss it," the housekeeper confirmed. "Best gossip in town happens at those meetings." Laughter rippled through the group, and Zara felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. The simple acceptance of these women was balm to her spirit after months of solitary travel. Across the churchyard, Zara noticed Yancy deep in conversation with Sheriff Blackwell and several other men. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes occasionally sought her out, as if checking on her welfare. When he caught her looking, he offered a small nod that somehow conveyed both reassurance and a question. "Are you all right?" Zara smiled in response, hoping he could read her answer. "Yes, perfectly fine." The ride back to the ranch was companionable, with Mrs. Jenkins recounting various snippets of news she had gleaned during the after-service conversations. Yancy drove in silence, but it was a comfortable one, not the tense silence of a man eager to be elsewhere. The Thornton girl had her cap set for Mr. Grayson something fierce a couple years back. Mrs. Jenkins informed Zara in a stage whisper that Yancy could clearly hear. "Still hasn't given up hope. By the looks of those daggers she was shooting your way." "Edith," Yancy warned, though there was no real heat in his tone. "Well, it's true," Mrs. Jenkins insisted. "Not my fault if she can't take a hint when a man's not interested." Zara felt a curious satisfaction at this information, followed immediately by confusion at her own reaction. "Miss Thornton is very beautiful," she observed carefully. "Any man would be fortunate to catch her eye." "Beauty's just the wrapping paper," Mrs. Jenkins declared. "It's what's inside the package that matters. Isn't that right, Mr. Grayson?" Yancy's only response was a noncommittal grunt, but Zara caught the subtle curve of his lips that indicated amusement rather than annoyance. Back at the ranch, Mrs. Jenkins bustled off to prepare Sunday dinner while Yancy helped Zara down from the wagon. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, and when she looked up, his expression was unguarded, revealing a warmth that made her breath catch. "Thank you for coming today," he said quietly. "It meant a lot to the folks in town. They've been worried about me becoming a hermit out here." "Thank you for inviting me," Zara replied. "Everyone was very kind." "Not everyone," Yancy observed wryly. "Rebecca Thornton looked ready to claw your eyes out." Zara laughed, surprised by his frankness. Mrs. Jenkins explained that situation quite thoroughly on the ride home. "Did she now?" Yancy shook his head, but a smile played at his lips. "That woman gossips more than a magpie." "She cares about you," Zara said simply. "They all do, from what I could see." Yancy's smile faded, replaced by an expression of thoughtful gravity. "I haven't made it easy for them. After Elizabeth died, I pretty much withdrew from everything. The ranch, my work, it was easier than facing people's pity." It was the first time he had mentioned his late wife by name to Zara, and she recognized the significance of the moment. "Grief does that," she said softly. "It makes us build walls." "Yes," Yancy agreed, studying her face. "But eventually, You have to decide whether to live behind those walls forever or start taking them down, brick by brick. The metaphor hung between them, laden with meaning. Zara sensed they were no longer talking only about his past grief, but also about the tentative connection forming between them, a connection neither had anticipated nor sought. I should help Mrs. Jenkins with dinner, Zara said finally, needing to retreat from the intensity of the moment. Yancy nodded, stepping back. And I should see to the horses. As they parted ways, Zara felt a curious blend of confusion and anticipation. She had come to the Rocking G Ranch with no expectation beyond temporary shelter, yet somehow in the space of a week, it had begun to feel like something more. The danger, she knew, lay in allowing herself to become too comfortable, too attached to a place and a man that were never meant to be permanent fixtures in her life. That evening after Mrs. Jenkins had retired and Yancy had gone out for a final check of the property, Zara sat alone by the fireplace, her hands resting on her swollen belly as the baby moved within her. The events of the day had left her unsettled, not in an unpleasant way, but in the manner of someone who suddenly finds themselves at a crossroads they hadn't anticipated. "What should we do, little one?" she whispered to her unborn child. "We came west for a fresh start, for independence. Is this where our journey was meant to end? Or is it merely a respite before we continue on?" The baby's response was a firm kick that made Zara smile despite her conflicted thoughts. "You're right. Perhaps we don't need to decide everything tonight." The sound of the door opening startled her from her reverie. Yancy entered, removing his hat and hanging it on the peg by the door before noticing her by the fire. "Thought you'd have retired by now," he said, shrugging off his jacket. "Just enjoying the quiet," Zara replied, gesturing to the chair opposite hers. "Join me?" Yancy hesitated only briefly before taking the offered seat. The firelight cast warm shadows across his features, softening the usual seriousness of his expression. For a few minutes, they sat in companionable silence, watching the flames dance. "You mentioned your late wife today," Zara said eventually, her voice gentle. "Would you tell me about her?" Yancy's gaze remained fixed on the fire, but he didn't retreat from the question. Elizabeth was a schoolteacher, came west from Boston to teach in the territorial schools. We met at a town social in Carson City. She was full of life, always had a book in her hand and ideas in her head. The fondness in his voice was palpable, untainted by bitterness despite his loss. Zara found herself wanting to know more about the woman who had first claimed this good man's heart. "How long were you married?" she asked. 2 years, Yancy replied. "Not nearly long enough. We were so happy when she became pregnant. Had all these plans." His voice trailed off, and he cleared his throat before continuing. "The pregnancy seemed fine until the end. The labor was difficult. By the time we got the doctor here from town, it was too late for both of them." "I'm so sorry," Zara said softly, instinctively reaching across to touch his hand where it rested on the arm of his chair. Yancy looked down at her hand on his, then turned his palm up to grasp her fingers gently. "It was a long time ago," he said, echoing his words from days earlier, but this time without the defensive edge. "I've made my peace with it. Mostly. Thomas and I were married for 3 years, Zara offered, feeling it was only fair to share her own story. "He was a good man. Not perfect, he had a temper and was stubborn as the day is long, but he was honest and hardworking." "Did you love him?" Yancy asked, then immediately looked chagrined. "Forgive me, that's not my business." "It's all right," Zara assured him. "Yes, I loved him, though perhaps not with the grand passion of storybooks. We were comfortable together, understood each other. His death left a hole in my life that I'm still learning to navigate around." Yancy nodded in understanding, his thumb unconsciously tracing small circles on the back of her hand. Loss changes us, makes us cautious. Yes, Zara agreed, especially about risking our hearts again. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something shifted between them, an acknowledgement of the growing attraction neither had been willing to name. Yancy's gaze dropped to her lips briefly before he released her hand and sat back in his chair. "It's getting late," he said, his voice slightly rougher than before. "You should rest." Zara nodded, suddenly aware of the impropriety of their situation alone by firelight, sharing intimate confidences. Yet she felt no real desire to retreat. "Yes, I suppose I should." Yancy stood and offered his hand to help her up from her chair. As she rose, the baby shifted position, causing her to gasp and press a hand to her side. "What is it?" Yancy asked, concern immediately replacing the earlier tension. "Nothing to worry about," Zara assured him with a small laugh. "Just an elbow or knee in my ribs. This little one is quite the acrobat lately." Relief washed over Yancy's face, but he didn't step back. Instead, he looked at her with an expression of wonder and hesitation. "May I?" he asked quietly, his hand hovering near her belly. The request surprised her, but Zara found herself nodding. "Of course." Gently, almost reverently, Yancy placed his hand where hers had been. For a moment, nothing happened, and Zara was about to apologize for the lack of movement when the baby obliged with a solid kick right against Yancy's palm. The look of astonishment that transformed his face made Zara's heart clench. Joy, wonder, and a shadow of old grief passed across his features in quick succession. "That's quite something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, it is," Zara agreed, equally quiet. His hand lingered, warm through the fabric of her dress, and Zara found herself holding her breath. The moment felt fragile, intimate in a way that transcended physical closeness. Another kick from the baby broke the spell, and Yancy withdrew his hand, though the wonder remained in his eyes. "Thank you," he said simply. "You're welcome," Zara replied, understanding that his gratitude went beyond the simple sharing of a moment. "Good night, Yancy." "Good night, Zara." As she made her way to her room, Zara's mind whirled with conflicting thoughts. The connection growing between them was undeniable, but was it wise? Her plans had never included staying in Ely, and Yancy's history suggested a man still wrestling with past losses. Yet she couldn't deny the sense of rightness she felt in his presence, as if pieces of a puzzle were gradually falling into place. She placed her hand where Yancy's had been, feeling her child move beneath her palm. "We're in uncharted territory now, little one," she whispered. "I'm not sure where this path leads, but for the first time in a long while, I'm not afraid to find out." As the days passed, Zara found herself falling into the rhythms of life at the Rocking G Ranch. Her strength returned fully, and with it, a sense of purpose she had been lacking since Thomas's death. Mrs. Jenkins was delighted to share household duties with her, teaching her the particular ways of managing a ranch home that differed from city living. Yancy, too, seemed to draw out of his shell more with each passing day. His natural reserve remained, but he began to include Zara in conversations about the ranch's operations, sought her opinion on matters both practical and personal, and found reasons to be in whatever part of the house she happened to occupy. The Thursday ladies' meeting proved to be exactly what Zara needed. The women of Ely welcomed her warmly into their circle, their needles flying as they shared news, advice, and friendly gossip. When they learned of her skill with embroidery, they immediately commissioned her to create decorative pieces for the orphanage quilts. "You have a real gift," Mrs. Bennet declared, admiring the delicate flowers Zara had stitched onto a quilt square. "You could sell these in town for good money." The idea took root in Zara's mind. Perhaps this could be her means of earning passage to San Francisco when the roads cleared. Yet the thought brought less excitement than it once would have, a fact she tried not to examine too closely. As promised, Yancy took her to see Dr. Anderson after a week at the ranch. The doctor pronounced both mother and child in excellent health. "Whatever they're feeding you at the Rocking G, it agrees with you," he commented with approval. "I've rarely seen such improvement in a patient in so short a time." On the ride back to the ranch, Zara found the courage to ask a question that had been on her mind. "Have you given any more thought to what you said at church? About taking down walls?" Yancy glanced at her, surprise evident in his expression, before he returned his attention to the road ahead. "Been thinking about little else," he admitted after a moment. The frank answer warmed her more than the spring sunshine on her face. "And have you reached any conclusions?" "Some," Yancy replied, his voice thoughtful. "Mainly that life's too short and too unpredictable to hide from possibilities." "Possibilities," Zara echoed, testing the word. "That's a hopeful way of looking at things." Yancy's hands tightened slightly on the reins. "Wasn't sure I remembered how to hope until recently." The admission hung between them, simple but profound in its implications. Zara felt her own carefully maintained barriers weakening in the face of his honesty. "The baby is due in July," she said suddenly. "Just after Independence Day, Dr. Anderson thinks." Yancy nodded, accepting this apparent change of subject. "Summer birth. That's good. Winters can be harsh here." "I've been thinking," Zara continued, her heart racing as she ventured into uncertain territory, "that perhaps I should wait until after the baby comes before continuing to San Francisco. Traveling with a newborn would be difficult." Yancy was silent for so long that Zara feared she had overstepped, implied an invitation to stay that wasn't welcome. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "You'd be welcome to stay as long as you need. The room is yours for as long as you want it." "Thank you," Zara replied, unable to keep a note of disappointment from her voice at his measured response. "I appreciate your generosity." They completed the journey in silence, the easy camaraderie of earlier replaced by a tension Zara couldn't quite define. Had she misread his signals? Was his kindness merely that kindness to a woman in need? Nothing more? That evening, Mrs. Jenkins announced that she would be staying in town overnight to help her daughter-in-law with a new baby. "Her first," she explained proudly. "Poor thing doesn't know a diaper from a dish rag yet. I've left stew on the stove for your supper." After Mrs. Jenkins's departure, the house felt strangely empty despite Yancy's presence. They ate in relative silence, the awkwardness from earlier still lingering between them. As Zara cleared the dishes, Yancy disappeared outside, returning a short while later with an armful of firewood. The spring evenings still carried a chill that warranted a small fire for comfort. "Looks like rain coming," he commented, arranging the logs in the fireplace. "Good for the pastures." "Yes," Zara agreed, searching for something more substantial to say. "Yancy, have I offended you somehow? You've been distant since our return from town." Yancy straightened, abandoning the half-built fire to face her. "No, not at all. I just—" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she had come to recognize. "I've been thinking about what you said, about staying until after the baby comes." "And that troubles you?" Zara asked, trying to understand his reticence. "No. Yes." Yancy sighed. "The truth is, I'm not sure I'm the right person to have around when your time comes. My experience with childbirth isn't encouraging." Understanding dawned on Zara. "Because of Elizabeth." "Yes," Yancy confirmed, his expression pained. "The idea of you going through that here, where I couldn't help, where something could go wrong, it brings back memories I've tried hard to bury." Zara crossed to him, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "I understand your fear. I have my own. But Yancy, what happened to Elizabeth was tragic but not common. Dr. Anderson seems very competent, and I'm healthy. Elizabeth was healthy too, Yancy said quietly, until suddenly she wasn't. I can't promise nothing will go wrong, Zara acknowledged. No one can. But I can promise that hiding from the possibility won't protect either of us from pain. Yancy looked down at her hand on his arm, then covered it with his own. When did you get so wise? He asked, a hint of his usual warmth returning to his voice. Not wisdom, Zara corrected gently. Just the hard-earned knowledge that tomorrow isn't guaranteed, no matter how carefully we plan. Outside, the first drops of rain began to patter against the windows, a soft counterpoint to the silence that had fallen between them. In that quiet moment, something unspoken yet profound passed between them, an acknowledgement that despite their fears and their pasts, something new was taking root. Stay, Yancy said simply, his eyes never leaving hers. Not just until the baby comes. Stay here with me. The directness of his request took Zara's breath away. Yancy, are you certain? This is sudden, and I don't want gratitude or pity to. It's neither of those things. Yancy interrupted, his voice firm. I didn't plan this. Didn't expect to feel this way again. But from the moment I pulled you from that creek, something changed. It's like I'd been seeing the world in shades of gray for years. And suddenly there was color again. Tears pricked at Zara's eyes, unexpected emotion welling up at his words. I feel it too, she admitted. This connection between us. But I'm afraid it's too soon. Afraid of depending on someone again. I'm afraid too, Yancy confessed, moving closer until they stood merely inches apart. But I'm more afraid of letting this chance slip away. We've both lost enough. Maybe it's time we found something instead. The rain fell harder now, drumming against the roof in a soothing rhythm. Zara looked up into Yancy's face, seeing all her own hopes and fears reflected there. Slowly, giving her every chance to withdraw, he lowered his head until his lips met hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. The tenderness of it nearly undid her. When they parted, Zara's heart was racing, but her mind was suddenly wonderfully clear. Yes, she said simply. I'll stay. Relief and joy transformed Yancy's features. He gathered her into his arms as best he could, mindful of her condition, and held her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. We'll take it slowly, he promised against her hair. Get to know each other properly. Do things right. Zara nodded against his chest, knowing that the path ahead would have its challenges but certain, for the first time in months, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The following weeks brought a blossoming of both the land and the relationship between Yancy and Zara. Spring gave way to early summer, the ranch lands turning lush with new growth as cattle grew fat on the abundant grass. Yancy courted Zara with an old-fashioned propriety that touched her deeply small gifts of wildflowers left by her breakfast plate. Evenings spent on the porch swing talking until the stars emerged. Rides in the wagon to show her the furthest reaches of his property. Mrs. Jenkins observed their growing closeness with barely concealed delight, though she maintained a pretense of disinterest. Not my business what two grown folks decide, she would say, even as she contrived to leave them alone together as often as possible. Word spread quickly through Ely that the reclusive Yancy Grayson had finally opened his heart again. Most of the townspeople responded with approval and good wishes, though Rebecca Thornton made a point of snubbing Zara at church and the ladies' meetings. Don't mind her, Mrs. Bennet advised. She had her sights set on being mistress of the rocking G for years, but Mr. Grayson never gave her a second glance. Her pride's hurt more than her heart. Zara's pregnancy progressed well as her 7th month began. Her belly grew rounder, her movements more careful, but she maintained her activity around the ranch, adapting her tasks to her changing body. One evening in early June, as they sat on the porch after supper, Yancy broached a subject that had clearly been on his mind. "I've been thinking about the baby," he began, his voice slightly hesitant. "About what happens after he or she arrives." Zara waited, sensing there was more he wanted to say. "I know we agreed to take things slowly between us," Yancy continued, "and I mean to honor that, but I also want to be clear about my intentions." He took her hand in his. "I want to marry you, Zara. Not right away if you're not ready, but someday. And I want to be a father to your child, if you'll allow it." Though not entirely surprised by the declaration, Zara felt a surge of emotion at his words. "You've given this serious thought?" "Every day since you agreed to stay," Yancy confirmed. "I know it hasn't been long, but sometimes life doesn't follow the schedule we expect. I lost one chance at happiness by holding too tightly to grief. I won't make that mistake again." Zara squeezed his hand, her heart full. "I would be honored to marry you, Yancy. But you're right, we should wait a while longer. Allow this child to be born. Give ourselves time to be certain." "Then we're engaged to be engaged?" Yancy asked with a smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Yes," Zara laughed. "That seems an excellent way to put it." To seal their informal agreement, Yancy pulled her into a gentle kiss that held all the promise of their future together. As June progressed toward July, the heat intensified across Nevada. Zara found herself increasingly uncomfortable as her due date approached, the summer temperatures making her swollen body feel even more unwieldy. Yancy was attentive to her every need, ensuring the house remained as cool as possible and relieving her of any strenuous duties despite her protests. "You're carrying precious cargo," he insisted when she objected to being treated like delicate china. "Indulge me in this, please." Dr. Anderson made a house call in the first week of July, pronouncing Zara in excellent health and the baby properly positioned for birth. "Could be any day now," he informed them. "First babies are often late, but everything looks ready." The certainty of the approaching birth brought Yancy's anxieties to the surface again. Zara often caught him watching her with a mixture of joy and fear, especially when she winced at the increasingly strong movements of the baby. "It will be different this time," she assured him one evening as they sat by the creek, enjoying the relative coolness near the water. "I'm not Elizabeth, and this is not the same situation." "I know," Yancy acknowledged, his hand resting protectively on her belly. "But knowing doesn't always quiet the fear." "Then we'll face it together," Zara said simply, covering his hand with her own. "Just as we'll face everything else." On the morning of July 7th, Zara woke to a strange sensation in her lower back. By mid-morning, the discomfort had resolved into recognizable contractions, though still widely spaced and mild. "It's starting," she informed Mrs. Jenkins calmly as they prepared lunch, "though it may be some time yet." The housekeeper immediately sprang into action, sending one of the ranch hands to fetch Dr. Anderson while she prepared the bedroom with fresh linens and hot water. Yancy, returning from checking fence lines, found the house in organized chaos. The color drained from his face when Mrs. Jenkins informed him of the situation. "You should rest," he told Zara, who was calmly kneading bread dough despite her condition. "Shouldn't you be lying down? Walking and normal activity can help in the early stages," Zara explained, having read Dr. Anderson's pamphlet on childbirth thoroughly. "I'll rest when things progress further." Despite her outward calm, Zara felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation as the contractions gradually increased in intensity. By the time Dr. Anderson arrived in the early afternoon, she was ready to retire to the bedroom, the pain becoming too intense for distraction. "You're doing wonderfully," the doctor assured her after an examination. "Everything is progressing normally. First babies often take their time, so try to rest between contractions if you can." The hours that followed tested Zara's endurance in ways she had never imagined. The pain built to seemingly unbearable levels, then receded, only to return stronger each time. Mrs. Jenkins stayed by her side, wiping her brow with cool cloths and offering encouragement. Yancy had been banished to the main room of the house, but Zara could hear his footsteps pacing back and forth, as the labor progressed into evening. "He's wearing a path in my clean floor," Mrs. Jenkins commented wryly during a brief respite between contractions. The sun had long set when Dr. Anderson announced that it was nearly time to push. Zara, exhausted beyond measure but determined, rallied her remaining strength for the final stage of labor. "I can't do this," she gasped as a particularly fierce contraction gripped her. "Yes, you can, Mrs. Jenkins insisted, holding her hand firmly. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time, and you're stronger than most." With a cry that seemed torn from the depths of her being, Zara gave a mighty push, feeling the child move within her. "That's it," Dr. Anderson encouraged. "The head is crowning. One more push should do it." Gathering every ounce of strength remaining, Zara bore down with all her might. A moment of searing pain, then a strange slithering sensation, and suddenly the room was filled with the indignant wail of a newborn. "A boy, Dr. Anderson announced triumphantly, holding up the squirming, red-faced infant. "A fine, healthy boy." Tears of relief and joy streamed down Zara's face as the doctor placed the swaddled infant in her arms. The tiny face, screwed up in protest at his abrupt entry into the world, was the most beautiful sight she had ever beheld. "He's perfect," she whispered, tracing a finger along his cheek. Mrs. Jenkins wiped away tears of her own. "Shall I fetch Mr. Grayson? The poor man's probably worn out his boots with worry by now." At Zara's nod, the housekeeper bustled from the room. Moments later, Yancy appeared in the doorway, his face a study in barely contained emotion. "Come meet your son," Zara invited softly. Yancy approached the bed hesitantly, as if afraid this moment of joy might be snatched away. When he gazed down at the infant in Zara's arms, the transformation in his expression was profound fear giving way to wonder, tension to tenderness. "A son," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "He's beautiful, Zara." Dr. Anderson, tactfully completing his work in the background, spoke up. "Mother and child are both doing exceptionally well." "You're a fortunate man, Mr. Grayson." "I know," Yancy agreed, never taking his eyes from the baby. "I'm the most fortunate man in Nevada territory." Carefully, reverently, he reached out to touch the infant's tiny hand. The baby reflexively gripped his finger, a surprisingly strong hold for one so small. "What will you name him?" Mrs. Jenkins asked, beaming at the tableau before her. Zara looked up at Yancy, a question in her eyes. They had discussed possibilities but made no final decision. "Thomas," Yancy suggested gently, "after his father, if that's what you wish." The consideration of the gesture honoring her late husband rather than staking his own claim confirmed for Zara what she already knew. This was a good man, one worthy of the second chance at love they had found together. "Thomas Yancy Halliday," she decided. "A name that honors the past while embracing the future." Yancy's eyes glistened with unshed tears as he leaned down to place a gentle kiss on her forehead. "Perfect. Like him. Like you." In that moment, surrounded by the people who had become her family, holding her newborn son and seeing the love in Yancy's eyes, Zara knew with absolute certainty that her near drowning in Ely Creek had not been a tragedy, but a blessing in disguise, the beginning of a new life more beautiful than any she could have imagined. As summer gave way to autumn, the Rocking G Ranch flourished under the care of its expanded household. Baby Thomas grew strong and healthy, his lusty cries and ready smile bringing joy to everyone who encountered him. Zara regained her strength quickly, resuming her duties around the ranch with the baby often strapped to her chest in a sling Mrs. Jenkins had fashioned. Yancy proved to be a natural with the infant, his initial hesitation giving way to confident affection. Many evenings, Zara would find him in the rocking chair by the fire, the baby asleep on his broad chest, a look of peaceful contentment on his face that made her heart swell with love. Their engagement to be engaged evolved naturally into a proper betrothal as the weeks passed. One evening in late September, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink, Yancy presented Zara with a small velvet box. "It was my mother's," he explained as she opened it to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond. "I've been carrying it with me since I went to town last week, waiting for the right moment." "It's beautiful," Zara whispered, tears pricking her eyes as he slipped it onto her finger. "Are you certain, Yancy? This makes it official in the eyes of everyone." "I've never been more certain of anything," he replied, drawing her into his arms. "I love you, Zara Halliday. You and Thomas both. I want us to be a family in every way." "We already are," Zara assured him, leaning up to kiss him tenderly. "But I would be honored to become your wife." They set the wedding date for November, giving them time to prepare and allowing Thomas to grow a bit stronger for the journey to town. Mrs. Jenkins immediately threw herself into planning, determined that the event would be the social highlight of Ely's year. "Nothing extravagant," Zara insisted as the housekeeper proposed increasingly elaborate arrangements. "Something simple but meaningful." In the end, they compromised on a ceremony at the church followed by a celebration at the town hall. The ladies of the sewing circle presented Zara with a beautiful wedding quilt they had been secretly working on for weeks, each square a different pattern representing their good wishes for the couple's future. The wedding day dawned clear and crisp, the November air carrying the scent of pine and wood smoke. Zara dressed in a gown of ivory silk that Mrs. Bennett had helped her sew, simple in design but elegant in its simplicity. Thomas, now 4 months old and growing plumper by the day, was dressed in a tiny suit that matched Yancy's. "You are the most beautiful bride I've ever seen," Mrs. Jenkins declared, tears in her eyes as she helped arrange Zara's hair. The church was filled to capacity, the entire community having turned out to witness the union of two people who had found each other through the most unlikely of circumstances. Even Rebecca Thornton attended, her initial resentment having mellowed to resigned acceptance. Pastor Williams spoke of second chances and divine providence, of love that blooms in unexpected places, and the courage it takes to open one's heart after loss. As Zara and Yancy exchanged their vows, Thomas gurgled happily in Mrs. Jenkins's arms, as if adding his own blessing to the proceedings. "By the power vested in me," Pastor Williams concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Mr. Grayson, you may kiss your bride." Yancy's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, the culmination of a journey that had begun with a desperate plunge into churning waters months before. The celebration afterward was joyous, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed half the territory. Sheriff Blackwell proposed a toast to the newlyweds that left few dry eyes in the hall. "To Yancy and Zara," he said, raising his glass, "proof that even in our wild corner of the world, amidst all its hardships and dangers, love finds a way. May your lives together be as blessed as you have blessed our community with your example." As the evening wore on, Zara found a moment of quiet to step outside, needing a breath of fresh air. Yancy joined her moments later, wrapping a warm shawl around her shoulders. "Happy, Mrs. Grayson?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist as they gazed up at the star-filled Nevada sky. "Completely," Zara replied, leaning back against his solid presence. "Though it still seems miraculous sometimes how we found each other. If that bridge hadn't collapsed." "I've thought about that too," Yancy admitted. How the worst moment of your life became the beginning of something beautiful for both of us. Life has a way of surprising us, Zara mused. When I left Missouri, I thought I was heading toward a new beginning in San Francisco. I never imagined my journey would end in Ely. Not an ending, Yancy corrected gently. Just a different kind of beginning than you planned. The wisdom of his words struck Zara deeply. So much of her life had been spent planning, working toward goals, trying to control circumstances that were ultimately beyond control. Yet the greatest joy she had found came from the most unplanned moment, a plunge into danger that had led her to safety, to love, to home. "I love you, Yancy Grayson," she said, turning in his arms to face him. "And I'm grateful every day for your courage in jumping into that creek without a second thought." "Best impulsive decision I ever made," Yancy replied with a smile, lowering his head to kiss her under the vast canopy of stars. Inside the hall, baby Thomas began to cry, his distinctive wail carrying clearly to his parents. "Our son calls," Zara laughed, taking Yancy's hand as they headed back to the celebration. "Our son," Yancy repeated, the words still holding wonder for him. "The first of our family, but perhaps not the last?" Zara's smile was answer enough as they rejoined their guests. Stepping confidently into the future, they would build together a future born from chance and courage, nurtured by kindness and understanding, and sustained by a love neither had expected to find again. In the years that followed, the story of how Yancy Grayson had leaped into the swollen creek to save a drowning, pregnant stranger became something of a legend in Ely. Like all legends, it grew with each retelling, embellished with details that made the tale more dramatic, the rescue more heroic. But for Zara and Yancy, the true miracle was not found in that single moment of courage, dramatic though it was. The miracle was in the thousand small moments that came after the first time Thomas called Yancy Papa, the birth of their daughter Eleanor 2 years later, followed by twins James and William the year after that. It was in the gradual expansion of the ranch, the respect of their neighbors, and the deep, abiding partnership that grew between them with each passing season. Life in the Nevada Territory was never easy. There were droughts that threatened the cattle, winters harsh enough to test the sturdiest spirit, and the constant challenges of raising for children in the still Wild West. But through it all, Yancy and Zara faced each trial together, their bond strengthened rather than weakened by adversity. Thomas grew into a thoughtful young man with his mother's dark hair and quiet determination. He showed an early aptitude for working with animals that made Yancy's chest swell with pride. Eleanor, fair-haired and spirited, inherited her father's way with horses and her mother's quick intelligence. The twins, identical in appearance but opposite in temperament, rounded out the family that filled the once quiet ranch house with laughter, arguments, and the beautiful chaos of love. On their 10th wedding anniversary, after the children had been put to bed, Yancy presented Zara with a special gift, a small wooden box he had carved himself, inlaid with a scene of the creek where they had first met. "Open it," he urged as they sat before the fire, the November wind rattling the windows of the home they had built together. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, lay a delicate gold locket. When Zara opened it, she found miniature portraits of their 4 children on one side and a lock of Yancy's hair on the other. "It's beautiful," she said, tears welling in her eyes as he fastened it around her neck. "Not as beautiful as you," Yancy replied, his hands lingering at the nape of her neck. 10 years of hard work had added lines to his face and threaded silver through his sandy hair, but his eyes still held the same warmth that had first drawn her to him. "Do you ever regret it? Staying in Ely instead of continuing to San Francisco?" Zara considered the question seriously, as she did all questions from her husband. "Not once," she answered truthfully. "Everything I was seeking, security, purpose, a place to belong, I found here with you." Even with the hardships, the isolation, the winters when we're nearly snowed in for weeks. Especially then, Zara assured him, taking his weathered hands in hers. Those are the times I'm most grateful to be here, surrounded by our family, knowing we can weather any storm together. Yancy's smile held all the tenderness of their years together. I thank God every day for whatever twist of fate brought you to that creek at the exact moment I was passing by. Providence, Zara said simply, echoing Pastor Williams's words from so long ago. Or perhaps just the universe's way of bringing together two people who needed each other more than they knew. As they sat together in the warm glow of the fire, secure in the home they had built and the love they had nurtured, the sound of the wind outside reminded them of how far they had come from that fateful day when a swollen creek and a collapsing bridge had changed the course of their lives forever. Outside, the vast Nevada sky spread its canopy of stars over the rocking G Ranch, where a family born of chance and courage slept peacefully, safe in the knowledge that sometimes life's most treacherous moments can lead to its greatest blessings. And in the heart of that home, Zara and Yancy held each other close, grateful for the second chance at love that had begun with a desperate plunge into churning waters, a leap of faith that had led them both, at last, to solid ground.